Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Mobilize Webinar Series. Thank you for joining. My name is Adham ElDafrawi. I'm the Technical Training Manager for the Middle East and Africa region over at Veeder-Root. And today's topic is about one of the latest additions to the product portfolio, is the Latitude Dispenser series. Behind us here, we have a Latitude LS300 fresh out of production and being prepped to go into reliability and endurance testing. So today's episode is sort of special because it's actually brought to you live from the factory, from our manufacturing facility here in India. And that being said, I'd like to welcome my first guest for this episode, Mr. Vijay Kumar, the General Manager for Factory Operations. Hi, Vijay.
Hi, Adham.
Thank you for joining. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Vijay, could you start by telling us a little bit about the factory operations and introducing us and the audience to the factory?
Sure. So, GVR Coimbatore factory is located in southern part of India, and this site was acquired from L&T in the year of 2010. And this site has spread across about 600k square feet, in which 200k is the built-up area. We do have ATEX, UL and MID certification. We are having about 700 plus employees working in here. Our products are like dispensers, STPs, meters, pumping units, manifolds, nozzles, etc. We have been widening our product portfolio by adding a lot of new products. The latest addition is Latitude. When it comes to Latitude, we do have a dedicated facility, the production line for producing Latitudes. We have a separate group who is producing the Latitude dispensers. And we do have a installed capacity about 300 Latitude dispensers per month, in which we have about 50% plus surplus capacity.
Wow.
And also we do have a track record of OTD, on-time delivery, 95% plus.
Nice. And listening to that, if I were in the audience and I hadn't seen what I've seen here, my mind would wander off to the fact of whether this impressive capacity comes at the expense of quality control and reliability.
No, not at all. Quality is our paramount, and we give utmost priority for quality. All the pots which we are using for building the dispenser are supplied by the qualified suppliers. When we are inboarding those pots, we do conduct inboard inspection, and those pots are used for assembling the product. And operators are fully trained and qualified operators. And operators are using the standard operating procedures to build the product as per our customer requirement. Also, we do have about 5 toll gates in the production line, wherein which we check for quality and whether it is meeting the customer requirement or not. We do have a lot of process POPs which makes foolproof system which prevents failures at customer. Similarly, we apply failure mode effective analysis, which is really anticipating the failure from customer, and we do have enough process control in place so that the failure won't occur at customer. Similarly, we do have some sort of quality assurance systems, like we do have end of line testing where the 100% of the products are visually inspected. Also, they are tested for performance 100%. And also we check for leak because we make a lot of joints in the manufacturing, and those joints should be leak proof when they are installed in the field. So we check for 100% leak, and all the products are going under 100% wet testing, and the real performance of the products are conducted here. Also, we conduct reliability kind of thing to ensure the pots are meeting to the expectation.
So let me iterate that 100% of the components and the product QC.
Yes,
that is impressive. And wet testing, I think that is something that not a lot of factories do, right? So I believe we're here at the DPG facility.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So we do give utmost priority for our product reliability. So we have got a great facility for checking the product reliability. The place where we are sitting now is called DPG site. DPG is dispenser proving ground, and in which we can check the product for real world condition. And this facility is one among the biggest dispenser proving ground in the world. And we test all of our products with gasoline and some ethanol mix content and so on. Similarly, we do have product endurance test where we check for about 10 million cycles of our pots, whether it is performing well or not, as well as we do water ingress test. Also, we do ambient test like extreme weather conditions. We check our products for its working condition from minus 40 degree to plus 75 degree. Also, as we have a lot of fabrication and those fabrications should be like rust free, we do also conduct a SST lab, which is called salt spray test lab. All our fabrication pots are tested for salt spray. It is tested for a few hours to say that it is withstanding from the rust.
Very nice, very nice. And I've also seen the suction lift tests that are being done where you lift up the dispenser and make all the testing and data analysis.
Yeah, we do conduct a lot of other tests too before launching the product into the market, like suction lift. The same way we do vibration test. Also, we do drop test because our products, when it is reaching the customer, it should function as it is functioning in the factory. So we do conduct all sort of simulations in the factory so that our products are performing well in the field.
That is quite reassuring. Vijay, I won't keep you any longer. I know you're a very busy man, so thank you so much for giving us this very informative introduction about the factory.
Thank you, Adham.
Now that we've had a little bit of an idea about where we are and about the factory and the birthplace of Latitude, I think it's time to take a deeper dive into the product itself. And to help us do that, I can think of no one better than our second guest today, who has been involved in the Latitude project since the conceptualization phase and everything that went into the design of it up until this day, our commercial portfolio manager for the Middle East and Africa region, Mr. Hoosain Arnold.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for that introduction. Firstly, a big kudos to yourself and the marketing team for balancing out the webinar we're having today, partially in the factory and some on presentation. I think it's a good mix to try and relate to our audience, what the pump's all about.
Thanks, Hoosain, and thank you. I think you're joining us remotely from South Africa, right?
That's correct, yeah, Johannesburg.
Awesome. So, Hoosain, when I introduced you, I mentioned you being there since conceptualization, and I really value your input and insights when it comes to the workshops that were being made with the voice of customers. So, can you start by telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, I think we can progress through the presentation.
Sure.
All right. So today, as you introduced, we're going to be speaking about the Latitude dispenser range, right? On screen, we have a sample of the Latitude family, starting from a low-hose LS100 to a narrow-bodied LS200, and then to the flagship model, which is the LS300.
That's it right there, an LS300.
Yeah. So I believe this is actually your quote more than it's mine, but the Latitude is really a pump that's been designed for the customer. So it's a short statement, right? But let's unpack that statement for a second. The pump was not just built to build a pump, right? Our team did extensive interactions with customers across high growth markets in multiple countries with multiple customers to understand what is the driving need today for the customer, right? And the development team took a lot of that information back and tried to build those solutions in the pump, right? So customer needs were a big thing around today's markets are, we want more foot traffic on our forecourt, right? We want more drive-ins. We want to build customer confidence. So we want the customer to come in, and when they refuel, they're confident that they were not robbed, or that what they paid for is what they got, right? And then also increase the reliability of the unit, right? To be able to operate in various markets and under various conditions. These were the key drivers that came back from customers.
And I believe I'd like to add also that the feedback was not only from customers, but from our own different technical support teams across different regions, and our channel partners, our distributors, our service contractors. So real technical feedback from the ground also fed into that pool of data, the output of which eventually went into the design of the pump.
Absolutely, absolutely, because those points are valid, right? When we build a pump, it's not just building a pump from one aspect. It's from build to installation and to after sales. So that's part of the whole value chain that we offer the customer.
Awesome. So I think our next slide speaks to design.
Yeah. So the design of the pump is what we call a modular design, right? In today's world, customers want to achieve the maximum benefit for their investment, right? A customer doesn't want to buy a unit today and in 2 or 3 years' time, his unit's outdated, or he cannot keep up with market trends, or he cannot keep up with regulation, or he cannot keep up with whatever would attract customers to say. So the design of the pump is you could buy a basic pump, right? With the capital expenditure you have today, and you could upgrade that pump over time, right? Examples of the retrofits that we can do on a pump is the lighted canopy. And the lighted canopy is really a first to market, right? It's a product that GVR has launched. And we'll talk about that as we go on. The multimedia, which is a common upgrade when it comes to wanting to do promotions, wanting to get more customers in your convenience store, right, and do promotions. And then from customers who buys equipment for standalone sites, and then eventually want to upgrade to automated sites, right? We can upgrade things like tagging also on the system.
So as we move on, I'd like to remind and encourage our customers again that you can always post your questions in the Q&A section at the top of the screen. There's an icon for Q&A specifically. So you can post your questions there as we go through the presentation. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll dedicate some time to answer the questions.
So if we look at the lighted canopy, right, we look at what are the issues that customers raised with us. Customers raised the challenge where, or should I say retail owners raised the challenge where customers drive in and they don't know where the available pump is, right? Or in Forecourt that's really busy, it's a bit disorganized, they cannot easily manage the traffic flow, right? And obviously, if any customer got frustrated to wait to be served, they'd eventually just drive off. So how do we try and address those issues? So the lighted canopy really talks to that. It's where we have an LED strip that runs through the canopy on the top, and it's generally in green when the pump's in idle. And when the nozzle is lifted, you'd actually see the canopy light change from green to red. That would show that position, that fueling position is now being used, or it's active, right? The idea behind this is to manage the flow better, to give the drive-in customer better visibility of where the next free fueling point is.
I think I can actually spotlight and so as you could see there, when I lifted the nozzle, the multimedia screen also indicates that the nozzle has been lifted and that the pump status is ready to fuel, and the LED strip color changes to red. LED strip colors are configurable, by the way. We have up to 8 colors that we can configure according to the branding, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be red and green. That is just the default setting, and it gets easily configurable via the command codes on the keypad. And there's also a skylight. So there's another strip, which is a skylight, which is facing downwards there. And you can also change the lighting setting, the same 8 colors on that skylight. It looks quite nice, and it also goes with the branding.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam.
You're welcome.
All right. Then another improvement or design feature that has been implemented in Latitude, excuse me, is the actual display panel. So there are 4 key areas that make up the total improvement on the display. Firstly, the display is inclined towards the customer, right? Secondly is backlighting. So the backlighting is much brighter. Third is the height off the ground. And fourth is the larger digit size and bolder characters. So what this basically does is when a customer is sitting in the vehicle, he can easily see the display, he can easily see what's happening on it, and that increases his confidence around the sale that's actually going on, right? He doesn't have to get out of his vehicle. Also, at night, much easier to see even in the day. And the way the display is being designed, or the incline is being designed, that even with direct sunlight on the screen, the customer can still see the sale that's happening on the screen.
Yep, I can actually attest to that because I'm sitting right here. I have my chair. So if I was in a vehicle right now, looking at the screen, and the screen is angled towards me, the driver.
Yeah. Just to deviate for a second, we did a physical test. We installed one of these alongside 2 of our older models on a forecourt, and we stepped back about 20 meters, right? And we could clearly see the screen compared to our older model, and it brightened up a lot at night, much more than our previous pumps.
I'm about 3 meters, 2.5, 3 meters from the dispenser right now, and I can see it clear as day.
Fantastic. So moving on to the next slide, multimedia. So multimedia is generally an upgrade path, right, for customers who start on an entry level. It can obviously be purchased with a pump. There's absolutely no problem. But we've designed the pump in such a way that this can be a retrofit. So today, if a customer had just bought a normal Latitude pump with just the sale display, but within 1 year or 2 years' time, he decides to automate his pump, automate his site where he's got a convenience shop and he wants better control. But now he wants to increase his foot traffic on the site, right, and increase promotions. This is a way of doing that. We can upgrade the screen, and it's a fairly large screen. It's a 15.6-inch screen. The beauty of the multimedia that we offer is the ad can be done with or without an internet connection, right? So it can be uploaded with a USB or flash drive, or if there is an internet connection on site, we connect the system to the network, and we upgrade the ad. The third very important feature is we assist the customer with the design of the ad. So they would inform us or upload to our website the ad they want to post. We package that together, we vet it, and then we secure the file, right? And we send the file back to the customer.
So that's digital signage, right?
Exactly, right? So what we do there is you can, number one, protect the customer and the customer brand, right? You could have people trying to have malicious intent to want to disrupt that file or post stuff that are not suitable for the forecourt. So part of that process is we enable the security of the ads that are being placed on the multimedia.
And I gotta say, Hoosain, being here, I've played around with the layouts of and different options when it comes to the multimedia screen, and I found it also very flexible in terms of configuration, meaning that you can dedicate the entire 15.6 inches to running only ads or only multimedia content. This is one layout option. Another layout option is you can dedicate the whole screen to show the grades in a pretty futurized kind of way, right? And you can see the transaction status. Once you lift the nozzle, you see it ready to fuel. You see the status of fueling. Once you return the nozzle, you get a thank you message that is configurable, or a transaction canceled message if you did a zero transaction, like lifted and returned the nozzle right away, right? So you get these messages, or you can have an option to have a split
screen. So for about 2/3 of the upper screen, you have the multimedia, you have your ads running, and the bottom part is the grades and the transaction status messages. Or you can also, the fourth layout is, it can be the same split, but the grades would be on the upper side of the screen, closer to the transaction display, right? So these are different layout options that I found to be very interesting, very flexible, right? As well as the fact that how you can configure the promotions. So centrally, you can configure the promotions to run through specific intervals, specific times of the day. You can do morning ads, evening ads that run in different ways. You can set dates and rules for the promotion to run for a period of time. So I've played with the cloud platform that is used for digital signage, and I think it's pretty oriented towards marketing and ad campaigns as well. It's not just about plugging a USB and playing the video, which is also an option, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if we think about it, that's part of the retail customer's business, right? He's not just selling fuel. He's got multiple businesses on site. They have C-stores. And the ultimate goal is to, how do I keep my customers on my forecourt? How do I keep getting my customers coming back to my forecourt?
Very true, Hoosain. And also there are reports where you can track the status of your promotions and track the exposure via transactions. And that is something that is always required by marketing, right? When you're running ad campaigns. So I think it really speaks to that aspect as well, and to that department at our customers' business.
Super. Then another concern from our customers, right, is theft and fraud. Theft and fraud, number one, increases the customer's bottom line. And when I say customer, the retail forecourt owner, right? Secondly, you could risk your brand, right? If people feel they are not being given the correct amount of fuel at the service station, right? And any piece of equipment that has a low level of security opens the door for fraud and theft. So what have we looked at in terms of improving the security on the Latitude pump? The first thing is that the pump, any third-party piece of application that tries to be implemented or connected on the pump will not work, and the pump will not work. The pump's communication between its electronic ports is all encrypted, right? So no one can plug an intermediary device between, let's say, a display and a CPU board and try and manipulate data. That's the first thing. The second thing is part of the calculator system, which is the pulsar, which measures the amount of fuel that goes through the meter, has got something that we call lift detection or lift protection. When this unit is lifted, its bolts are undone and it's lifted, we actually get an error and that locks the pump up. The pump will not dispense, right? That's also a common way that people try and defraud pumps. And security of the calibration we've implemented. So it's a few things. It's a matter of cutting a seal, then having to access a certain switch to allow calibration to be changed, and then there's still a password on top of that, right? So there's quite a few layers to get through when it comes to
Exactly.
protecting
And
the
our pulsars
calibration.
are smart pulsars, right, Hoosain? So they're identifiable. So the pulsar is communicating with the main board, and the main board identifies each pulsar with its serial number and its respective location. So when you open a specific switch, it's recognized as that pulsar in that location with that address, right? So it's very secure in that way, and obviously all the data communication is encrypted between different boards.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's very important if you think about it, right? If someone had the ability to manipulate the pulse so they could come and swap it out, right? But as you said, the minute they lift the nozzle, right, there's a communication band that happens and it checks that pulsar with that serial number is still in the correct position. And if its serial numbers change, it just won't activate.
Very true. And another security risk is tamper, right? That merits a slide on its own. EMT,
Yeah.
tamper, right?
Yeah. Yes. So if you look at high growth markets, right, automation is is something that I think we're trending towards, right? It's not as as widely implemented as mature markets. So the mechanical or the electronic totalizer is probably the most common way that retailers manage how much fuel has been sold through a nozzle. But in the past, they found that people have manipulated these, either unplugging them or messing with the electromagnetic mechanism. So what have we done around this? One is if there's a disconnect with that particular totalizer of a nozzle, that electronic totalizer, the pump will go into an error state, right? So someone tries to disconnect it. Then we also have what we loosely term as a health check on the actual magnetic coil, right? Every time a pulse gets sent through it, we check if that electromagnetic totalizer is actually energizing. So it's a twofold system on the monitoring of the EMT.
Yes, and I believe when EMT is being disconnected, the pump goes into error state. That's something pretty common. But what is special here in that case is the fact that there is some kind of feedback from the EMT, but it's not moving. So it might still be connected, but it's not moving or it's being tampered with. And that is also captured, and it also puts the pump in error state.
Yes, correct. Then, what is the next challenge that customers raise with us, right? In high growth markets, power supply from a grid can be unstable. Today it's there, tomorrow it's not there. The power is fluctuating. With these fluctuations in voltage, in AC or grid voltage, if the equipment is damaged, firstly, the customer's got an expense, right? If you think about it, insurance companies generally say if your equipment is damaged by, I don't know, acts of God, as they say, they're not going to really pay those things. So, but worse for the customer is having to pay for damages is the downtime. Having one or two of your pumps knocked out in your forecourt really impacts your revenue. So what are the solutions here? Firstly, the power supply has been redesigned to manage incoming voltage fluctuations better, right? So down as low as 90 volts AC up to about 330, I think could be about 360 VAC, right? And what this does is it basically protects the electronic boards. It manages the power and makes sure that the output power is stable at 220. Furthermore, when we have motors connected directly to the relays of the power supply, the IntelliSense protection also checks for over and under voltage of the motor. So if the voltage drops too low or goes too high, it will disconnect the motor to protect the motor from failure. And what does this ultimately mean for the customer? If we can protect the equipment better from fluctuations of voltages, it just means less downtime for the customer, less cost that he's incurring, right? And higher uptime with better throughput on his forecourt.
And I think, Hoosain, I've discovered something during my visit here is that everything that we've been talking about now is regarding the switched mode power supply, right? But what I've discovered is that this is actually the second line of defense, and there's another first line of defense. So as the power comes from the junction box, it goes first, before it goes into the SMPS, the power supply, it goes first through a power filter. And that power filter's role is twofold. It does noise elimination, so it can eliminate all those noise spikes up to 4 kVs that happen in microseconds. That is eliminated. And then it has a voltage regulation role. So the output from that power filter, the input is obviously AC voltage, and the output from that filter is DC. It's 373 DC current, so it's a linear, stable current. And that volt DC is actually the input for the power supply. And then the power supply has everything also that Hoosain is talked about. So the power safety electronics here is very impressive, I have to say.
Yeah. And if I just think about stats, right? Because we also sit on a team that does weekly performance monitoring of the pumps. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think we've ever seen power supply failures on any of our equipment that we've sent out. So that really talks to a very stable power supply that has been designed for this pump.
that's a strong statement, especially given the conditions in the region where power failures and power grids can be quite unstable. There can be lightning surges, right? And not every station has stabilizers and UPSs.
And if you think about it, just to drift back to that power supply topic, right? If a customer has to install voltage stabilizers or voltage conditioners, right, it becomes an expensive exercise to do something like that. And to have that as part of your pump feature, right, it lowers your cost of ownership.
So another very powerful pain point, right, is service.
Yeah, service. So customers, well, what are their concerns? Downtime, big pain point for customers, right? And if a pump's down, they want that pump to be repaired or serviced as quick as possible. Okay. Challenges can come in where the access to the parts that need to be replaced is difficult. Sometimes the service engineer, service technician need special tools to get in. And him being there for like an hour when he should have been there for 10 minutes, right, can really frustrate the guy. It can tire these guys out. So part of the design is also looking, and I think you mentioned this at the beginning of our conversation, is also looking at the servicing aspect, right, of the equipment. One, the equipment's got to be designed that when the service engineer or technician gets there, one, he can access the components quickly and easily, right? And secondly, he can service and change those pieces of equipment safely. Right? Those are the two aspects that we looked at design from hydraulics and electronics. I mean, if you look at the picture on the screen there, the electronics is behind the display, right? So that display door. And that display door has a side hinge. So opening like you would open a window to the side, right? That's number one, easy access for him. It's safe for him, and all the electronic boards are accessible to him. Similarly with the hydraulics, if you open the lower door, accessing the meters, the valves, the filters, all easily within reach. The engineer doesn't need a bunch of special tools. It makes his job easier, and it makes his repair quicker.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hoosain. I agree 100%. And being here at the factory actually brought my attention to a couple of more points that I'd like to add on this point here. So first off, the fact that engineering team, along with product and tech support teams here in the factory, have created an outstanding level of documentation that covers everything there is to know about the pump. And that is not something that you can say about every product, right? I'm very impressed with the level of documentation and the level of detail and how user-friendly it is, right? So this is one point. The other point, which is something small, but it makes a big difference, is cable management inside the pumps. So even the cable management is done very nicely, and the clamps that fix the cables on inside the pump are reusable. So once you put the pump into service the first time, and somebody has to change a cable, and they cut the clamp, then going forward it becomes a mess and gets even messier with every intervention. But with the reusable clamps, when you change a cable, you simply remove the clamp, change the cable, put the clamp back on, right? And speaking of cables, another brilliant thing that I've seen here in engineering is that they're basically using Ethernet cable in the pump communication, in the board communications, right? So for a lot of dispensers, it's a pain point where if you have a cable that needs to be changed between this board and that board A and board B, then that is a specific cable with a specific part number that you need to order from the factory, right? But this has been addressed in Latitude since the boards are very well secured and the encryptions are strong, so we're not worried about security. So you can basically change the cables with Ethernet cables. So if you have an Ethernet roll in your service van, you're all set, right? So this is something that I found also brilliant. And finally, about service, I think, well, basically part of the reason that I'm here, I'm not the only one here from the Middle East and Africa region. We actually have pump experts from the Center of Excellence team from across every main office in the Middle East and Africa region, right? And they're being run through an intense training program so that they bring an expert level of technical support on Latitude back to their respective sub-regions, right? So we want to be closer in terms of tech support and minimize factory escalations and be closer to our local channel partners, our service contractors, and our customers.
And I think that is a good point to mention for the audience, right? It's also on how we stay on top of training, how we stay on top of knowledge sharing, how we stay on top of creating the level 1 and level 2 support and strengthening that in the regions, right? To make sure that either in every country we have a distributor that's trained, or we have a knowledge expert in a region that when a customer approaches us with a query, it can be solved quickly, rather than telling the customer, sorry, we have to go and find it at the factory how to fix your problem.
Absolutely, Hoosain. And before we move on to the next slide, I'm seeing that I'm not seeing any questions as of yet. So I'd like to remind our audience again that you are free to post your questions in the Q&A icon. And to raise your hand, you can simply post the question straight into the Q&A chat box, and we'll take it from there.
Or I think this slide starts coming to the end of the technical bits for the Latitude. Another challenge we've identified with customers in high growth markets is flow rates. Okay, the dispenser flow rate is either inconsistent or it starts off at maximum flow rate, and then very quickly, when I say very quickly, in a short space of time, it starts reducing, right, to a slow flow. This could be caused, or is mainly caused, by the quality of the fuel. So the fuel could be, it could be the service station itself, right? It could be the tanks having debris in. There could be debris in the product, right, that causes the filters to clog up, and this causes ultimately dispensing to slow down. Now, slow dispensing, one can frustrate the customer, the actual customer who's purchasing the fuel on the side, right? Why are you taking so long just to put in 30 liters of fuel in my car? So what does the retail service station owner have to do? He has to call up an engineer to come out and clean the filters. Because they clog up often, he has to call the guy more often, right? And it costs him money. So there's a chain of events that impacts the retail service owner and his customer. What have we done to look at this problem? Well, firstly, we've looked at the redesign of the filters in the system. The filters have been designed with approximately 50% more surface area. So that keeps the dispensing at maximum for the longest possible time, right? So we increase the servicing of the filters, let's call it that, right? When you do that, you increase the servicing time, it means you get maximum flow rate for a longer period of time, and then your servicing cycles start extending also. So instead of calling an engineer, I'm using an example now, right? Under normal conditions, once a month to come clean your filters, you would extend that period, right? You wouldn't be calling him every month, maybe every other month to clean the filters.
Very well explained, Hoosain. Couldn't have said it better. Speaking of hydraulics, I think the next slide will take us to flow rate management, since it's becoming increasingly important in our regions, especially for sites that deal with a lot of motorbikes or smaller vehicles in that respect. So, can you give us your insights about that?
Yeah, again, in high growth markets, right? Two-wheel transport is very popular, motorcycle transport, right? And motorcycle fuel tanks are not as large as a vehicle fuel tank, right? A lot smaller. So what are the challenges here? If you fill a motorcycle fuel tank with a normal flow dispenser, right, 40, 50 liters a minute, there's a few things that you challenge with. One is there's a chance for spillage, right? So there's a risk there. Two, trust, right? If you fill my little 4-liter tank on my motorcycle within 4 seconds or 5 seconds, am I really going to believe you that you filled 4 liters, right? So there's an element of trust with the motorbike owner, with the customer.
Absolutely, and I've seen these tanks, Hoosain, the small tanks, when they're being, especially with diesel, that is, it's very foamy, right? It's like basically pouring a shaken can of Coca-Cola into the tank, and you have to wait for it to settle and then pump again and pump again and pump again. That increases the transaction time and reduces the trust in the final literage that is delivered.
So the way this is solved in Latitude, right, is a couple of things. One is having a very accurate low volume preset. Right? So when we put a preset in, we can now do lower volumes, right, on the preset. Secondly, there's an option for us to select the flow rate on the pump, right? Whether we're doing a motorcycle dispensing or normal fuel dispensing, and that's between 20 liters a minute or 50 liters a minute. So if you combine these things, number one, there's a safety feature. You're not fueling too fast and spilling fuel. And then you're also gaining the trust of the customer that you're actually giving him the fuel he's paying for.
Yeah, and one more thing you're saying is that this is initially I thought this was done at service technician level, or someone who needs to go and access the command code menu to change the configuration, to change the flow rate. But what I found here, which is really impressive, is that you can actually configure hotkeys on the keypad. So you can have one hotkey with one press on the preset keypad, you change the flow rate to 20, and another press you change it back to 50, and so on. So that I found very impressive, and obviously this requires the configuration with a proportionate valve, right?
Absolutely, yeah, right. So a proportionate valve, depending on the amount of voltage we supply to proportional valve would depend on the speed. But I mean, those are fantastic thought through processes that the engineers have done for the customer, right? The customer doesn't have to think. He knows if I press a certain key, it's a motorbike dispenser. If I press the key again or another key, I'm doing normal flow rate. So also the ease of use of the pump is very important for the customer.
Exactly. And so next up is another point that is increasingly required as the retail business becomes more and more competitive, right? Which is branding. So this is 100% your area, I was saying. So I'm just gonna leave that to you.
Absolutely, right. So if we think about it, right, customers are brand conscious, right? They want to associate with a good, strong brand, a brand that's got a good footprint, and they get good service from, right? And they have an element of trust, if you think about it, right? I want to know I'm getting clean fuel. I want to know I'm getting fuel that's not going to damage my engine. And so for the oil company, whether it's an oil company or independent owner, they have a brand and they want to promote that brand, right? If you look at the pump on the screen, it's been designed with that thought in mind for the customer, putting as much space on the pump for the customer to brand, whether it's the colors, whether it's the logo, whether it's a name, right? And we've seen the design really offer the customer, and we put out a number there, right? But let's just say it's definitely, there's more than 10% better branding space on our dispenser for the customer to brand the pump.
Absolutely, Hoosain. And so before we move on to our last point, we're coming towards the end of the slides now, the end of the presentation. So I'd like to remind our audience about Q&A. So please feel free to ask all questions in the Q&A icon top of the team session.
Yeah, I think this is our last slide on this one. So our current market that we are promoting our Latitude in are our high growth markets, right? So that's Middle Eastern Africa and Southeast Asia.
Right, so
I think we
think that
Q&A now.
That concludes the presentation. I think we need to move to Q&A now.
Are you able to, so I'm studying presentation mode, are you able to see any questions you'd like to read out from the audience?
Yes, let me go through the questions. So I'll read them out loud for you, Hoosain.
Sure.
All right. So we have a question for someone who is located in Liberia, in West Africa, in tropical weather, where humidity is 80 to 85% all the year. What are the preventions for the electronic components for such weather conditions? And there's another part of the question about lots of thunders that can affect the electronic components, although our sites are equipped with lightning detectors.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, right? I think
Very much.
Yeah, the first to answer the first part of the question, right? In the factory, we definitely do temperature testing from low down to in the minuses to high up in the 70s, right? In that band, you would definitely find humidity changes, whether it's low and you can have a high humidity, even on the higher temperatures, high humidity, right? If you look at the pump design also, the electronics cabinet is a sealed cabinet. So when we lock it, it's got a seal inside, right? That prevents. So what I'm saying is moisture ingress is very, very limited under the high humidity conditions. To drift to the second part of the question under lightning storms, I think the first key part is the power supply is, as we said, that is something where we manage the AC voltage coming in, right? It's very important to manage rogue voltages such as lightning, to look at earthing. The pump's got a very, very good structure itself, okay? But we still recommend good earthing. And from a perspective as a supplier of pumps, we'd be very happy to engage our customers and advise them on the correct earthing recommendations that we have, right? Which we could look at alongside what they're already doing or see if there's any improvements we can do on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hoosain. And I've seen also the atmospheric chambers where the pumps are being tested for reliability and endurance and other specs that have been mentioned. Question. And as well as the IP rating. So the pump is IP rating, right? So even on the top part here at the top of the canopy, if you want to change that strip, there are 36 screws to remove from the top roof of the canopy. And when you're putting it, and there's a gasket, so when you're putting it back, you need to have a specific torque for the 36 screws, so not to mess with the IP rating. So the pump is pretty well isolated. That would be my point, and from that example, right? Another question here is, can we use submersible pumps? So, Hoosain?
Yes, if I understand the question correctly, it is using submersible pumps in the tank, and you have a dispenser on the island, right? So in our formats for LS100, the low hose, LS200, which is the narrow body, and LS300, which is the wide body, we have them in both formats. We have them in the pressure format, where you use them with a submersible, and we have them in a suction format, where you have a motor inside and a pumping unit that basically draws the fuel out of the tank.
Absolutely, Hoosain. And I've seen how the GPUs are being assembled, and some of the components are being manufactured here and assembled, and they're being thoroughly tested. 100% of the GPUs are being tested thoroughly and wet tested as well, not just with air, right? So if you look at a dispenser like this, you won't know if it's pressure or suction, right? You will not know if it needs a submersible pump or if it has its own motor until you open that bottom, the panel, then you'll find out. But we do supply both models, right? Another question we have is it available to integrate CRIND, which is card reader and dispenser, in Latitude? And if not, are there any plans to enable it in the future?
So that's a very good question, right? And excuse me. The answer is that today we are actually trialing 4 CRINs with Latitude. We are trialing 2 models from Gilbarco, out of our own stable, and 2 with a company called Invenco, which ironically is also part of our stable now, right?
Yep.
These trials are running now at least they're running from now until early into Q4, and then we should have availability by the end of the year into 2023.
Thank you, Hoosain. I think these are all the questions that we've had so far. I'd like to thank our audience and obviously yourself, Hoosain. It's always a pleasure to have these kinds of discussion with you. Only this time we did it in front of an audience, right?
Yeah.
So I hope that the audience enjoyed the session as much as I did. So I'd like to thank everyone again.
And from my side too, Adham, yeah, thank you for the audience for the attendance. Thank you for the questions. And what I'd like to leave the audience with is, feel free to reach out to Gilbarco Veeder-Root. You can either your local representative, wherever you are, or if you pop onto our website, I'm sure we have a link where you could post a query and we could get one of our pre-sales or engineers to contact you and respond to you.
Absolutely, I second that, Hoosain. And Hoosain, in the Q&A section, I'm seeing a lot of requests of sharing the recording of the webinar. So I'd like to assure everybody that the recording will be shared. So again, always a pleasure.
Fantastic.
And
thank you, Adham,
Hoosain.
for the efforts. Thank you for the effort you put into the webinar. I appreciate that.
It's always a collaboration, man. You've seen everybody from all over the region and from India team, and we're collaborating with the US team with Applause. So everybody's has been involved, right? So that's the spirit. That's the Gilbarco Veeder-Root spirit.
Absolutely.
So thanks again. Namaste, everyone.